All
Right.
another time.
All right. So I'm recording now. Hi, William. It's so good to see you today. And
Good to see you.
I know I sent over some information to you about the 40X concept that I would really wanted to walk through with you today about the one specific client that we've brought you on to help with. And I know you have a lot of leadership experience as well. And so briefly, here's where we are. I know you were with us in our meetings, and we have presented the brand, the new internal brand and core values to this transport company. And, now we're looking, they are actually asking us to write up a proposal about how do now they execute this, because they are recognizing, as you remember, we showed them the 360 review of their culture, of their brand, and then unveiled a new internal brand with vision, mission, core values, and a tagline and a rallying cry. And, so everybody's super excited about that, but they're now, and then we put some strategic recommendations about how to infuse this, but that was the end of that one deliverable. We're not actually supposed to do it, but now they're asking us to do it. And so that's why we brought you on. So thanks for being part of that. So the reason I was wanting to talk to you today is that I know you reviewed the concept of 40X. I know that's not something you're as familiar with, but as I'm looking at their environment, and they have a million things that are the whirlwind, the churn. Do you remember reading about that? Okay, good. They have so many things that are that, and they're looking at all these lag measures like retention, turnover, employee satisfaction, which is they have a weird way of measuring that. But truly it's a culture issue, and they know that, but they don't know how to roll it out, which is partly why we brought you in, but also they want to measure it. So when I think of that, I think that we need to recommend to them that they develop and stick to, for 2024, a wildly important goal of basically raising their culture measured score. I'm going to say 10 or 15 points, maybe just 10 points. We haven't decided yet.
Can I ask
But
you a
that's going to
question about that?
require, yeah,
All
sure.
right.
Yep.
So raising the culture, what's the hope or the tie connection to the business? Is it to increase employee engagement, to increase the performance of the teams, or
All
what
of
is,
it.
oh, all of it. Okay.
Yeah, all of it. So there's all those lag measures, and the culture engagement surveys that they've done they're more employee engagement type measures, but they touch on culture. So
Okay.
they're going to need to we're going to need to create an actual culture survey that we deploy before we roll all this out. They don't have an employee reward system at all. They don't have, I mean, there's like a vast amount of things they could do. I mean, they have
Sure.
tenure awards, but they don't have anything that like ties it to, core values. They don't,
Yeah.
like caught doing good or none of that. And so yeah,
How
ask
how
your
convinced
question.
how convinced are they that improving the culture is going to improve all of the business metrics as well, or how that the linkage between the two? Because often I see, yes, we understand we need to increase engagement, but how does that translate into increased revenue or decreased expenses?
Right. So they're there now. We are
Okay.
lucky to be stepping in. I think they agree, but they're saying, okay, prove it. But the reason
Okay.
they're saying they agree is to quote the CEO, we've tried so many things.
Okay.
And one of which was they decided to deploy management training to all the managers who had less than satisfactory scores on their 360. And of course, we had some discussion about how, when training comes out of HR, it's punitive, like period. Like,
Yes.
so if, and the CEO has made several comments, he's mid to late 50s, and it's a family owned business. And he's like, we've changed the model of how they feel like we've changed everything, and we're trying to explain to them that as their main concern is the terminal managers and all the transport drivers, because that's the linchpin. That's the majority of employees. 2/3 of the workforce is that. 1/3 is handling billing and, all the business side. But that's where the most churn is, turnover and all that. And so,
Yeah. So there's absolutely costs, and you can measure the costs associated with turnover.
yes, you can turnover and onboarding. They have no onboarding structure that relates to culture. It's just, here you are, here's your truck.
Got it. There's no reinforcement of the brand or the values.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of things that we would roll out next year, but I believe that if they don't have something trackable and some big like measurement that we're all like looking towards, instead of like this measurement, this measurement, this measurement. So what are your thoughts on that?
So I from a business perspective, often what I see is a lot of skepticism around an HR metric. They want to also measure the business metric that the HR metric is claiming to link to, so that they can see the correlation in the increase in both. And so I don't know what you're thinking in terms of the WIG, but I wonder whether the business metric is the WIG or the HR metric is the WIG. Because in some ways, the culture metric is predictive of an improvement in the business sort of metrics.
Yeah. I think I hear you, and I do think that feedback, but they specifically said if we're doing this, we need a culture scorecard.
Okay.
And so what I don't want to have though is a culture scorecard that's like retention, this, like it's so many of these lag measures. I think it needs to be, like, and each manager probably needs to be held accountable of their part of the WIG, things like, nominating people for this employee, rewards program that we're going to roll out. That's actually just affirmation. It's not even money. It's just, being part of this gold circle of, exhibiting all 5 core values during the year. You get, a set of, I don't know, mugs or something. This is the kind of culture. They love this stuff.
Yeah. No, I've seen companies that do that.
But they do nothing like this.
Writing
and so but the managers, and then the other lead measures we talked about implementing for at that level would be, texting their people on their birthday, calling them, like some of they're not doing any of that. Like, so this manager taking care as an example of exemplifying this core, because one of their core values is empathy, and that's what they're choosing. So we're looking at that. We're looking at some, but the big piece of this that I'm struggling with, and that's why I wanted to bring you on board, and I'd love for you to poke holes in, is how do you measure culture, right? I mean, I think it has to be a culture survey, and then is there an overall favorability score that we start with in the first rollout, and then, and then there's one at the end of the year, and we see where we are, and that's our big WIG. What has been your experience about that, and what would you poke holes in this for me?
Yeah. So there are maybe 7 key things I think that are elements of a high performance culture, if that's what you're focusing on. I don't know if you're looking for I don't know what the core, I didn't do my homework, so I didn't read what the core values were that came out of what they wanted, but out of the high performance culture, there's sort of trust, autonomy, ownership, truthfulness, embracing negative reality. You might have heard some of these already. Yeah. Development, mission orientation. And so something that I've done in the past assignment is to create a client, an employee survey that does an employee assessment of the presence of those things, as exhibited either by their manager or by their team members.
Yeah.
And it's really important to sort of clarify, is it the manager they're rating or the CEO that they're rating or somebody in between, in terms of how leadership can mean many things to different people. So, but that's more in the details. But I've created a questionnaire that does sort of 3 questions on each of those attributes, plus maybe, so that's 7, and then you can add 3 more attributes, cultural attributes that maybe are specific and individualized for the client based on their values. So to get an even 10 elements of culture that you want to measure.
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking as we figure out how to roll out a survey like that, that we would obviously have to develop with them. But then the WIG cannot be improving culture. It has to be improving culture by X amount as per this survey. And so what I hear you saying is we might want to have our WIG be a more business metric. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So the tricky thing with a survey is that you need a baseline. So you need to run the survey twice.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. That's what I was thinking we have to do. Yeah.
So, but I think that can be part of the WIG, is that to see, you run the survey, create the baseline, and then develop the WIG based on the results of that initial baseline survey. They say, okay, we want to see over the next 6 months, these 3 attributes improve or something like that. And then with the agreement that and then we'll take the survey again in 6 months, and, managers incentivized to sort of raise those scores. And then hopefully at the end of the 6 months, or maybe it's even 3 months, those new survey results show the needle moving on those attributes, and maybe some others as well, because invariably these are all connected. So
yeah, that's really helpful. And can you see any, like, what am I missing here as far as like hiccups or, the sticky points that, the sticky parts that, they're, as I mentioned, this will be new. They feel like they've tried things before. I think you asked me what the CEO thought, and they feel like they've tried things before, but it's been sort of like, one of the things they've done is like I mentioned, they have a survey that they've done about employee engagement, and it was based on managers. And so they've got a firm that's sort of training those managers, especially the underperforming ones. They're supposed to train everybody, but they're focused on them. And, the CEO mentioned, well, we've tried this. And of course they tried it, for a year. And so, but they haven't really owned it. And then the other little thing to mention to you that you were not around for is that there is a bit of a preoccupation on what I think are more outliers based on my data research, but on the naysayers, the people that wish we were like this, but it's a narrative that comes up. And
it may be a vocal minority as well, even though they're not representative of the
right. And it comes up in the leadership team. They keep talking about these people, and it's like, they say, well, we are not the old Klondike. We don't want to be the old Klondike. We're innovative, but we're still going to care for our people. We love them. And, but then they go back to what they've heard. And so any feedback on that? How, something there?
So one thought is often, doing these in smaller versions first, like a pilot type idea, is helpful. So maybe pick a team that's of a decent enough size, maybe 50 to 100 people, maybe, and test the survey with them first. And maybe even think of this as a 12-month program where you see what you can do with that team over 6 months. And then that becomes the proof of concept to then roll it out for the full employee.
That's a great idea. Yeah, that's a really good idea. Yeah, that's good. It's hard to convince people of that they need this one unifying goal. I mean, and I'm anticipating they will have pushback, but I think you've given me a lot of good insight, and I'll probably want you to be in the meetings with me. So when we're convincing them, this is our metric. So, okay, I think we're good. Thank you.
Great.
All right.
Right now.
Now I think we're supposed to do.
Yes, this is like cut to the debrief.
Okay.
So, as someone who was new, who was coming in to the team, I felt valued, heard. I felt like you wanted my input, that you were listening and you were taking it into account. I felt like I was kind of making some things which you had already thought of, but you were very sort of open and kind to sort of just receive it anyway,
Mhm.
from me. Um, and Yeah, and I felt included. I felt belong, like, oh, I'm already a member of this team. I've just joined. You've just brought me on to this consulting team, and I feel like I'm an integral member because you said, oh, I need you in the meetings with me and so on.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Okay. Negative or constructive feedback?
yeah. So I tried to throw a little uh red herring or something, whatever you call it, with the whole culture versus the business.
Uh-huh.
And um I don't know if you really kind of shut me down. It was more like, no, this is what the client has asked for, so that's what we're going to deliver, which was, I think, quite valid, honestly. But
Yeah,
it
I definitely was like, nope, but I didn't say that. So
okay,
you read it. Yeah, I was like,
okay.
no. So
I guess my yeah, and so that was
I should have pulled on that
and
thread a little bit longer because yeah, that's a really good point. I'm glad you caught that because I do get my mind made up in my, I mean, even though I'm opening to feedback, sometimes I get stuck, right? I'm like,
Mhm.
and just it
Well, yeah, and that's fine. I think it's more of a longer term view. Like, if this is going to be a continuing engagement, there has to be linkage to the business side.
yeah,
But in terms of the actual interaction itself, which is what we're really having a feedback about, I
right.
thought it was a very light sort
Okay.
of shutdown. I didn't feel completely shut down because once you said no, the clients actually asked for a culture scorecard. I was like,
Yeah.
well,
Right.
we get what the client wants. So
Right. But I'm here, I want to be engaged in getting all your advice because if the client wants that, but that's the wrong thing, we also need to be open to that. So,
it's
you
a good
know,
point.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Now, I don't give you feedback. We're just done, right?
Well, if you pause for a second,
Do I pause or stop?